Given the popularity of The Witcher as an IP and the fantasy world in which it exists, the ubiquity of Witcher build requests should come as no surprise. I've personally spent countless hours searching through raw Witcher builds, homebrewed Witcher classes, and semi-homebrewed versions that almost always include Matt Mercer's Bloodhunter mutant subclass. Nearly all the raw builds include some version of the Eldritch Knight or Ranger, usually the Monster Slayer or Hunter. I mean, Witchers hunt monsters, so why not, right? Do those subclasses provide specific powers and skills that mimic Geralt's powers? Not many. Are there other classes that can do this job more effectively? Honestly, the best Witcher build I've personally seen was a straight Fiend Warlock with Pact of the Blade. It's solid, but I think we can do better. Unlike last week's build, where we followed Luke from functionally powerless to a full-fledged Jedi, and that guided our progression, this week we're building a character who has most of his powers right when we meet him. With that comes a certain lack of direction, but it also provides us with the freedom to progress as we see fit. We're going to take full advantage of that. So what is a Witcher? If you clicked on this video, you probably already know, but for our purposes, it'll help to define the term. Witchers are itinerant monster hunters that were taken in as children and subjected to intense alchemical processes, mutagenic compounds, and relentless physical and magical training. These procedures functionally change a Witcher from their original species or race, usually a human, into a mutant. Geralt of Rivia, considered in-universe to be one of the greatest Witchers, displayed unusual tolerance for the mutagens that grant Witchers their abilities, and was selected to further experimental mutations, and thus develop greater speed, strength, and stamina than his fellow Witchers. Let's dive into the build. Despite being born human, Geralt considers himself non-human in part due to the changes he underwent during the Trial of Grasses, but also because of the rejection he faces from most of the societies he encounters. With this in mind, variant human as our race is a solid choice, but I'm going to recommend custom lineage, which allows us to create a mutant lineage with an extended lifespan and provide us with some key abilities. Geralt is a medium-sized creature. The ability score we're going to bump is Charisma, a bit of foreshadowing there. For our feat, we're going to select Telekinetic. This will give us another +1 to Charisma, along with providing us with our first sign. Telekinetic Shove, the secondary feature of this feat, works well for Geralt's art sign. Unfortunately, the Mage Hand cantrip isn't a fit for us, but that Shove and +1 makes the feat worth it at level 1. As I mentioned in the Luke build, for abilities that don't quite fit with the restrictions we're placing on ourselves to make the most accurate builds possible, you can choose to hold yourself to that limitation, or expand the abilities because in the end, this is a game. A quick note on Witcher signs. Witchers use one-handed magic spells of comparably limited power in both combat and conversation. Despite being relatively weak compared to mages and druids, Witchers can use these signs to good effect both offensively and defensively. For our purposes, we'll focus on the signs as presented in the Witcher 3 video game rather than the books or TV, mostly because the TV show was extremely limited with the sign usage and most people are more familiar with the video games. There are 5 signs: Ard, Igni, Erden, Quinn, and Axii. Ard is a directed blast of telekinetic energy. Igni is a pyrokinetic burst that can repel and ignite opponents, as well as start fires. Erden forms a magical trap on the ground that triggers when traversed. Quinn forms a protective shield around the caster. And Axii muddles the mind of an opponent. Each of these signs has variations and alternate modes that gives us lots of options for our spell and ability selections. We'll dive deeper into each sign as we level up. One of the permanent mutations Geralt endures during his trials are his cat-like eyes that grant very acute night vision. Dark vision fits perfectly. For our language, I would suggest Elvish, since Geralt speaks or at least understands Elder, the oldest language still in use, spoken by elves and mages. For our ability scores, once again, we're not trying to match the subject's physical and mental stats. Exactly. Geralt is one of those characters that's basically good at everything, which we will incorporate into this build, but not through ability scores since we're limited by the point-buy method. Because of the necessary multi-classes, we're going to take Strength 13, Dex 14, Con 12, yeah I know, we'll work on that, Intelligence 8, Wisdom 10, Charisma 15. With the racial and feat bonuses, that brings our Charisma to 18. When you think of Geralt, Charisma being his greatest attribute certainly seems off, but it's essential to this build. For background, and this is important, we need to build a custom background with 2 skills and 2 tool proficiencies. Witchers possess an uncanny ability to track and hunt people and monsters. An enhanced sensory system allows them to identify the species of animal from the scent of their blood and detect nearby beings even when out of sight. They also develop a 6th sense, their Witcher sense. that allows them to feel things around them, be it items of importance or people's immediate intentions. Knowing this, we're going to want to get really good at a few skills. Perception and survival are the obvious picks. With our mediocre wisdom score, we'll need to figure out a way to improve these skills beyond basic proficiency, and we will, along with adding a few other important skills that will lend themselves to monster hunting. Witchers are also frequent mixers and users of powerful potions, having developed an advanced tolerance to their inherent toxicity, but still limited to a few at a time. Even one of their weaker brews would be fatal to an ordinary human. I've seen a few Witcher builds that suggest taking the Artificer Alchemist subclass. Let me make it clear that this is not the direction we're going here. Aside from this subclass being possibly the worst in the game, it's just also a poor fit. The potions you can make don't really match much of anything we see in the Witcher universe. The lack of toxicity mechanics and this being an intelligence-based casting class makes Alchemist a hard pass for me. Instead, the Herbalism Kit provides us with the supplies to create remedies and potions. I would work out the details of potion making with your DM so that you can really dive into this proficiency and make a variety of potions beyond just potions of healing. Witchers are also trained to utilize bombs and develop poisons and oils to coat their weapons. We'll deal with the poisons and oils later, but to handle bomb making, we'll want to get proficiency in alchemist supplies. This should cover us for all potions and any bombs we want to make. Fluffernutter! If there is interest, I may release a bomb and potion video guide diving into all the options for converting the Witcher items into D&D equivalents, but that's too much to cover for this video. Unfortunately, the final tool proficiency I would love to have but can't make it fit is the playing card proficiency. I love me some Gwent, but it's just not in the cards for this build, pun intended. For equipment, at level 1, take whatever you can get. The stuff we want won't be provided as starting equipment. We obviously need 2 longswords. You can silver one if you want, but mechanically that doesn't do much for us in D&D universes. To really capture that 2-sword feel, I would probably do something like have a general +1 or +2 longsword, and then look to get a monster-specific magic longsword, like a Giant Slayer longsword. Not a perfect match, but it's something. This is obviously very DM dependent, and if you're going that far, you may want to plead your case for a homebrew magic item that does bonus damage to all non-humanoids. That probably does the best job capturing the 2-sword Witcher feel. Geralt also uses a hand crossbow for ranged combat, so we'll want one of those, and eventually grab some medium armor, half plate or a breastplate, whatever you want. At level 1, we're not going with Ranger, as I'm sure you've guessed. We're not going with Fighter, we're going with Warlock. I will say that if you're interested in a heavy armor Geralt build, which this won't be, then you'll probably want to bump your strength, dropping dex a bit, and take a different starting class to get that heavy armor proficiency. For us, we're going with a medium armor build, so Warlock works. The reason we're starting here is primarily for the proficiencies and the patron. To further support our monster hunting and Witcher senses, we want investigation and nature proficiencies. For our patron, we got to do the dreaded Hexblade dip. We need the Hex Warrior feature. Weapon and armor proficiencies are nice for this level, and more importantly, we need the Hex weapon so we can use Charisma for a longsword. If you do get 2 usable magic longswords, you'll want to modify this build a bit by taking more Warlock levels. For our spells, we're going to triple up on the Quen sign and take 1 lower power Axii spell. Let's talk a little bit about the Quen sign. Quen, at level 1, blocks a single attack. There isn't much in D&D that absorbs a single attack regardless of the damage, but there are many spells and abilities that provide a similar function. Arcane Ward is basically perfect as it's a rechargeable protective barrier that soaks up damage. Unfortunately, with an 8 intelligence, Wizard is out of the question. However, in similar fashion, anything that provides temporary hit points probably provides us with the closest analog for the basic Quen sign. I know it's common to think that spells that produce actual shields or barriers are the closest equivalent to Quen, but absorbing hit points more closely reflects the basic Quen feature. Quen 2 provides an exploding shield, so when you're hit and the Quen shield is broken, it explodes, sending enemies back and possibly knocking them prone. We don't have any strong contenders for this in D&D. There are plenty of knockback and knocked prone abilities, but nothing tied to a shield-like barrier. At Quen 3, you get an active shield. It basically lasts as long as Geralt's stamina. We have plenty of spell options for this one. And finally, Geralt gets Quen Discharge, which deals damage to attacking enemies as long as the shield is active. We have the perfect option for this one, and it's one of the reasons we went with Warlock. For our cantrips, Blade Ward is an okay proxy for Quen 1. You trace a sigil in the air, which is a cool detail, but Quen doesn't reduce damage, it just stops it. It's close enough though, and we'll have cantrips to spare. Friends gives us an advantage on charisma checks by influencing the target's mind. This works for Axii. And for our first level spells, we'll take Armor of Agathis and Shield. Armor of Agathis provides temporary hit points and damage to any enemies that hit you while it's active, so it's perfect. Shield lasts until the start of your next turn, adding an AC bonus until your next turn. This works fairly well for an active shield option, and it doesn't hurt that it's one of the best level 1 spells in the game. Now Geralt is primarily a martial character, so we need to bump those melee abilities while also providing us with as many of his other skills as we can get. Because of that, we're going to multi-class into Paladin. As mentioned earlier, if you want to go with a heavy armor build, you should start with Paladin instead of Warlock. You lose out on the nature proficiency with this option, so bear that in mind. You may be thinking that Paladins and Witchers make no sense, but hang in there. Allow me to explain. At Paladin 1, we get Divine Sense and Lay on Hands. Divine Sense allows us to detect anything affected by the Hallow spell, or know the location of any Celestial Fiend undead. Depending on source, our Witcher senses, or the Witcher Medallion, allows Geralt to sense the presence of magical creatures. Play it whichever way you prefer. For Lay on Hands, Witchers are said to possess accelerated healing, granting quick recovery from injuries, tremendous resistance to disease, which functions as complete immunity, and a boosted immune system allowing them to consume large quantities of potions that could prove easily deadly if consumed, even in small amounts by a normal man. A resistance to poison. Lay on Hands handles all three of these. We can restore hit points, cure disease, or neutralize poisons right from the first level of Paladin. At level 3, we're going to multi-class again, this time into Sorcerer. That's a lot of multi-classing right out of the gate, but it's necessary if we want that really well-rounded Geralt build. For the origin, we're going to take Divine Soul. I know, Divine Soul and Paladin, what's going on? Well, again, there are some really strong spells that we need for this build on the Cleric spell list. We get Divine Magic, and like a good Witcher, we'll take Neutral. With that, we get Protection from Good and Evil. I'd probably flavor this as a potion that provides additional protection from specific creature types. We also get Favored by the Gods, a bonus to saving throws or attacks once per short rest. It works well with our Witcher senses and martial skills, but we're primarily here for the spells. We get 4 cantrips with Sorcerer, and this will give us all the cantrips we need with one exception, Sapping Sting. Unfortunately, that is only available to wizards, but it's a perfect Ard Blast to knock flying creatures without hover prone. If you can convince your DM to allow that one, I would snatch it up. Instead, we'll take Control Flames for some of that Igni Flare. Green Flame Blade is necessary for us to be effective from levels 5 and up until we can get extra attack. Flavor it as using Igni to light your blade on fire. Gust works as a low-powered Ard Blast. And finally, Prestidigitation for snuffing out candles and torches and lighting them again. For our level 1 spells, we need Burning Hands and Charm Person. With those 4 fire spell pickups, that covers us for the low-level Igni spells. At level 4, Paladin 2, we get a Fighting Style. I recommend Defense here. If Paladin's got superior technique, I would grab that in a heartbeat to get some maneuvers, but it's not to be. We also get Divine Smite. Geralt is certainly not divine, but you can flavor this as blade oils that do extra damage to specific creatures, or Geralt's knowledge of bestial anatomy, allowing for more effective strikes. Either way, you need to use this ability. It makes no sense to punt one of the best features on one of the best classes in the game. For spells, we have some solid options. Command functions as both an Axii and Ard Sign. For ground enemies, you can freeze them in place with the Halt command. For flying enemies, in the absence of Sapping Sting, you can use Grovel to force them prone, which will drop them out of the sky. Searing Smite gives us a continuous damage fire spell to a single enemy, like the Igni Firestorm sign. Shield of Faith gives us a weaker but longer lasting Quinn effect. Thunderous Smite gives us an Ard ability that can knock foes back and prone, in addition to a weapon attack. For the Smites, flavor them as a sword attack and then a sign casting. At Paladin 3, we get Divine Health, so we're permanently immune to disease. See? Paladins and Witchers share a lot of the same abilities for some reason. Harness Divine Power for additional spell slots, and our Oath. To be honest, there aren't a lot of great options that fit well with a Witcher, but the Oath of Vengeance gives us a few good spells and some workable channel divinities. Abjure Enemy forces one creature to save or be frightened, and its speed drops to 0, not a bad Axii Light. And Vow of Enmity gives us a martial boost to a single enemy, perhaps mimicking Geralt's extensive knowledge of various creatures. For spells, we get Bane and Hunter's Mark, which boosts our tracking of marked creatures, and we didn't even need to take Ranger levels for it. At level 6, Paladin 4, we get an ability score improvement and another spell preparation. We'll bump our Charisma to 20 and take Cure Wounds to further mimic the Witcher's exceptional healing abilities, and Detect Magic for our Witcher senses. At level 7, Paladin 5, we get extra attack finally, and second level Paladin spells. Our Oath gives us Hold Person, which is perfect for Axii's stun ability, and Misty Step, a great spell that unfortunately has no Witcher equivalent. You know what I'm going to say here.
We'll also want to drop Detect Magic so we can take Find Steed. Roach has finally joined the party.
Don't touch Roach.
You thought I forgot, didn't you?
I talked to my horse.
At level 8, we're going to multi-class again. This one is a bit out there, but trust me, it gives us a lot of things we need. We're going Bard, which gives us proficiency with an instrument. You'll never use this unless you get super drunk with Dandelion. And we get a skill. I recommend Insight here. Geralt's Witcher senses allows him to detect people's intentions, so Insight is a good fit. We also get Bardic Inspiration, which we will never give out, but these will be quite useful in a few levels. For spells, take whatever cantrips you want. We have all the sign spells that work. For level 1 spells, I'd suggest Animal Friendship. Axii can be used to calm your mount when spooked. Detect Magic as a ritual for the Witcher's Medallion, which reacts to the presence of sorceress auras in the immediate surroundings, making us aware of nearby spellcasting, active illusions, or magical creatures, according to Vesemir. Earth Tremor and Thunder Wave are both Ard Blasts aimed downward to give the circular effect. Earth Tremor knocks enemies prone and disrupts the ground, while Thunder Wave knocks them back. Level 9, Bard 2, we get Song of Rest, which does nothing for us. But we also get Jack of all trades, which is absolutely great for a character like Geralt that is functionally good at everything. And some of the skills that Geralt is clearly good at, yet we have no proficiency in weak stats. I'm thinking of things like acrobatics and athletics or arcana. Jack of all trades gives us a little boost that rounds out the character. For spells, we'll want to add sleep. In the books, there is an actual sign called Somni, which puts people to sleep. In the games, this seems to have been merged with Axii, but either way, sleep as a way to temporarily incapacitate opponents works. Level 10, Bard 3, we're going College of Swords. This allows us to use a martial weapon as a focus, and it gives us a fighting style. Dueling is a must. We have 2 swords, but we'll never wield them at the same time. Swords Bard also gives us blade flourishes at this level, furthering our martial capabilities and giving us a good use of our bardic inspiration. At this level, we also get expertise, which I feel is essential for this build. I considered going Rogue 1 for expertise earlier, but I think the extra 2 levels are worth it. Perception and survival work well for our needs. Having expertise in both of these skills, and another that we'll get later, shores up our tracking and hunting skills. For our spells, we're going to drop Sleep and take Heat Metal and Suggestion. The level 2 Igni sign heats and damages metal armor. We don't have the option to permanently damage armor, but Heat Metal lets us burn a single metal object, including metal weapons and armor. If we want access to all the Igni options, this spell is mandatory. And another reason we need these Bard levels. Suggestion gives us an Axii 3 option where we can turn enemies into allies, make the suggestion to an enemy that his friends are secretly trying to kill him, and he needs to defend himself right now, and see how he reacts. We'll end up with a few variants of this Axii level 3 sign. At this point, level 11, we're going to go back into Sorcerer. Level 2 gets us Font of Magic, so we start accruing sorcery points. For spells, we're going to retake Sleep, which isn't a great spell at higher levels, but it can still be useful against weaker or damaged enemies. At level 12, we're a Sorcerer 3. We get Meta Magic, which can work quite well with this build. Twinned and Quickened work best for our purposes. You can twin spells like Hold Person if you don't want to upcast, or quicken big spells like an upcast Armor of Agathis and still attack twice with your action. You can even attack twice and quicken Green Flame Blade to get a third attack that does an additional 2d8 to the main target and 2d8 plus 5 to a second target. You can add Blade Flourishes and Divine Smites to really pack on the damage. With our spells, we'll want to lose Sleep again, so that we can take Crown of Madness and Dragon's Breath. Crown of Madness is another of those Axii spells that turns enemies into potential allies. Dragon's Breath gives us that round after round sustained fire burst, and our best option for Igni 3 Fire Stream. Obviously, choose fire damage and have it spew from your hand rather than your mouth. Tasha's Mind Whip is another Axii-like spell that you may consider taking. It's actually a better spell than Crown of Madness, but I don't think it fits well. At level 13, we're going to go back to Paladin to get that sweet, sweet Aura of Protection. Our Witcher/Spidey Sense gives us a +5 to all our saves and any allies within 10 feet. We get another spell preparation at this level. If we're staying completely accurate, I'd retake Cure Wounds. But if we're going for a bit more oomph, then Bless and Aid are fantastic spells that continue to be effective even at these high levels. Don't forget to cast Aid when your allies go down. With a second level slot, you can bring back 3 downed allies just like that. Level 14, Sorcerer 4, we get another ASIR feat, and we're going to go with the Poisoner feat here. As a bonus action, you can coat your weapon with poison. Damage ignores resistance, but not immunity, bleh. We also get proficiency with the Poisoner's Kit, and can craft poisons that can deal additional damage. At this level, we also get another cantrip. Go ahead and take whatever works. Again, we have all the cantrips we need, so dealer's choice. I would also take Calm Emotions. Axii can be used to calm people, along with animals, of course. At level 15, we're Sorcerer 5, and we need to talk about the elephant in the room, Erden. To this point, we have multiple levels of each sign from weakest to most powerful, and the alternate signs, with the exception of Erden. We have no Erden spells. None. That's going to change right now, and it's one of the main reasons we went with Divine Soul. If you don't like how late we get Erden, then I'd beeline for Sorcerer 5 as soon as you like. But just know that this means other spells and abilities will be delayed. So what is Erden? Erden forms a magical trap on the ground around Geralt that slows enemies that enter the ring and can eventually cause damage while inside it. The alternate Erden sign casts a single glyph that blasts foes that approach the symbol. We hear a few interesting details in that description that should remind us of a few 5e spells. Magical Trap, slows enemy, causes damage while inside it. I've seen Magical Circle and even Spike Growth as two Erden options, and even though I will recommend taking Magic Circle because thematically it seems to fit really well, mechanically it doesn't do much for us. Spike Growth is just a bad option in my opinion. It's giant brambles of spikes and thorns where enemies caught inside can just choose to stand still and take no damage. Even if you get past the flavor of the thorns, mechanically it's kind of the opposite of what we want, which is damage to enemies that stay inside the ring, which neither Magic Circle nor Spike Growth do. But you know what spell does that? Spirit Guardians. Aside from the ring following the caster rather than staying in the same spot on the ground, this spell is just perfect. It slows enemies, damages them for as long as they stay in the ring. Even the spirit aspect of this spell fits nicely with the Erden spirit themes. Erden is a spell to materialize spirits, and Spirit Guardians materializes spirits to damage enemies. I love this spell for Erden, even if it's not a perfect match. For this level, we'll unlearn Charm Person to pick up Magic Circle and Spirit Guardians. As an honorable mention, Hunger of Hadar provides a 20-foot ring placed on the ground that damages enemies and causes blinding darkness in that area. It's actually a solid fit, but the fact that you can't see anything and everyone can be damaged by it causes me to pass on it for this build. Black Tentacles is a wizard spell that works pretty well too. At 16, we're jumping back into Bard for a 4th level. We get another ASIR feat. I take Skill Expert here just to shore up our skills and our constitution. Unfortunately, since we have Jack of all trades, this feat isn't quite as powerful as it is for other builds because we're only getting an additional half proficiency when we gain new proficiencies. Despite that, I'd recommend taking something from Arcana, Acrobatics, Animal Handling, or even Intimidation. For expertise, we're going to take Nature. With expertise in Perception, Survival, and Nature, this character is a full-fledged hunter and tracker, despite a completely average Wisdom score. For our spells, go ahead and grab Charm Person for another level. At 17, we'll stay with Bard. Level 5 gives us Font of Inspiration, so we get our Bardic Inspiration dice back on a short rest, which is great. We'll drop Charm Person to pick up Enemies Abound, another solid Axii spell that turns enemies against each other. And Glyph of Warding for our alternate Erden sign, which drops a single sign and continually damages nearby enemies. The Explosive Runes glyph will explode and do one-time damage to enemies in the area, which isn't a perfect match, but we have some other options. Cordon of Arrows, a ranger spell that places several arrows in the ground and they auto-attack approaching enemies, is actually a good choice that we don't have access to. Melf's Minute Meteors works decently, but it follows you around instead of stays in one place on the ground. We'll get a great option in a couple levels. At level 18, we go back into Sorcerer for a 6th level and get Empowered Healing, which does nothing for us. I'd probably take something like Hypnotic Pattern, a strong Axii-like spell that charms and stuns those that fail to save. At 19, we are Sorcerer 7 and get 4th level spells. I drop Crown of Madness at this point, especially since we have Enemies Abound. Here we can pick up Charm Monster, another Axii ability, and Guardian of Faith, the best Erden alternate sign available. You drop a Guardian in one place, it doesn't move, and it damages any hostile creature within 10 feet of it. It's as good as we're going to get, and another reason why we wanted Divine Soul. And finally, we'll finish up with Sorcerer 8. With our ASI feat, I would take Resilient Constitution. This solidifies our saves to the point that with our aura, we should never fail a Constitution saving throw or a concentration check. It also brings our con to a 14, so we get 20 additional HP, a nice bonus. For our final spell, I'll recommend Sickening Radiance as another Erden type spell that drops a ring that damages creatures that enter. It doesn't slow them, but it causes them to gain exhaustion, and it doesn't materialize wraiths, but it does prevent creatures from turning invisible, sort of a similar function. And with that, we're a level 15 caster, but with no spells above 4th level, so don't forget to upcast spells and use plenty of Divine Smites. We have a strong martial character with really solid spellcasting that sticks to our 5 signs, along with great tracking and hunting abilities and the skill to make potions, bombs, and poisons. And that, my friends, is Geralt of Rivia. The Witcher.
So that's all life is to you? Monsters and money?
It's all it needs to be.